welcome to the latest episode of Cold Calling Live with myself, David Bentham, Director of Sales Development at Cognism, and as always, the amazing Morgan Ingram from. I always get your job title wrong, so Morgan, if people don't know you, give yourself a shout out. Come on.
It's all good. I mean, to keep it short, if you've been here before I even say anything, if you've been here before, show us some love in the chat. If this is your multitude of times you've been here, we'd love to see it. And in short, 3-time LinkedIn top sales voice, sales content creator. And I'm just here to give y'all some insights. So I'm excited for it.
Love that. So me and Morgan were chatting a bit before this, and I think if you have tuned in before, and like Morgan said, if you've been here a bunch of times before, we love to hear how many times you've been. I think someone said last time they've been here to been with us all 7 times. So please post in the chat. But we're gonna mix things up a little bit more. We're thinking of having like a more casual one where it's more about the Q&A, because I think especially last time we had loads of questions, but we did not get a chance to answer them all. So if you have a question, there is a Q&A section in the chat, or you can post it in the chat as well with your questions. Anything related to cold calling, sales development, sales, like anything you want to ask us, we love to get that. And then through the magic of this software that we're using, if you're feeling super brave, we'd actually love to kind of get you on video, join us like right here in front of everybody and asking those questions. And I know that we're start of a new quarter. Perhaps last quarter wasn't quite what you wanted it to be, and you want to make sure that you are not making not repeating that, or perhaps there's like maybe you're like mid-month and you're kind of thinking like, oh, I need to pull something out of the bag here, and you're a little bit stuck and you want to kind of ask us any questions that you have around perhaps a current problem you have, then please throw it in the chat. So a couple of things we need to chat. How many times you've been here? Great to see Julie Parker. Welcome for the first time. Throw that in the chat. We'd love to hear where you guys are calling in from, and then most importantly, what questions you have for us. Morgan, anything I missed?
No, that is spot on. So if anybody has any questions, throw them in the Q&A. Again, we are here to answer your questions. If you have anything that you're struggling with in terms of cold calling, or when it comes to cold calling, you're like, hey, like there's that I'd like to learn more about, throw it in the Q&A. We can get to it.
Awesome. So Morgan, you've got your own sales development team, right? If I'm not wrong. What are the key highlights right now at the moment? What are the key things that your team are working on right now?
So I think the main thing, even with the team and just what I'm telling other teams as well, is that we really are trying to understand the intro. I feel like is pretty solid, but what are the questions that you need to be asking to open up the prospect quicker? So when you're thinking about like your product or your service, like you're thinking about like the value prop, like, okay, like how am I going to articulate this value to get across my point, whatever it is. But like really what I'm focused on is like, what are the questions that we can ask to then open up that conversation, right? Ultimately, like that's the goal. And that's like what we're looking to accomplish across the board. So that is something that I've been working on, and then reverse engineering the problems that a prospect has. So let's say that they're really struggling with X, Y, and Z. Well, we need to come up with questions with that to then open up the conversation. So that's more so like what I've been working on with team, also people, to then articulate the things that matter to them so they can have the most relevant points across the board.
Amazing. And is there any like nuggets? Can you give us some like behind the curtain nuggets that you're giving to your team? Do you, if that's not too selfish.
No. So what we're doing is like, if you have there's tons of different softwares out there that you can use to record your calls and review them. So one thing that we're doing is that you actually take the calls that you have, and then essentially from those calls, we try to find like common themes that people keep bringing up across the board. So maybe they talk about they have this problem over and over again. We keep uncovering it. So then we find out, okay, well, we need to ask more questions around this problem, because ultimately that's actually leading us to getting to the results that we want. So that's just like an example. But if you're thinking about crafting good questions, it's really like trying to understand what are the problems that keep coming up on your prospecting calls, but also problems that come up on your AE's calls too. So then we're just taking those problems and then creating them as questions so that we can get ahead of them. So when we flip it over to the account executive, it's a better scope.
Love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. I actually, I recently went to a training session from one of our in-house trainers here at Cognism, and he said something that I thought was such a small change, but a brilliant change, specifically related to questions. And he said, instead of starting questions with what, start them with tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, a classic question that we ask at Cognism on our cold calls is, what do your new business processes look like right now? Just to kind of, it's really open ended. It's just to try and find out like how they're finding new business. What are you doing to find new business is another one. And he said, switch it and make it tell me. And just by changing the language ever so slightly, I think what he's hoping for is that, and I'm sure it's true, it'll have a massively positive impact in terms of opening the prospect up. There's something about if you think about speaking to your friends, how was your day versus come on, tell me all about your day, right? I think the how was your day? Good. Tell me about your day. Tell me a story. So yeah,
like
just
that.
on that, I thought I absolutely loved it. So I thought I'd share. Amazing. All right, so we've got some questions coming through, and I think people picking up already that you can throw some emojis on the bottom. So if you like the question, definitely throw it up there. But also, if you put them in the Q&A section of the chat, people can vote them up and down, and so we can take a look at the questions that you want answered. So it's great seeing them. Thanks for the people, both Mike and Layla, that have put their questions forward. I think we'll start off with those. But if you do have any, if you do put them in that Q&A section, then we can obviously see who, which ones the people everybody here in the audience wants to see us answer. So let's start off with this one from Layla. Layla says, I'd love to know how to open and hook. So for the first 5 to 10 seconds, let's talk about openings and hooks. Morgan, where do you want to start?
So this is a newer concept. Anyone in here, have you gone fishing before? Put a 1 in the chat if you've gone fishing. I'm actually super curious if anyone. Have you gone fishing, David? Have you been fishing before?
I've never gone fishing. I'm not a fish. I actually lived on a canal, it was a prime fishing territory, but I can't.
And you didn't fish?
No. I don't think I've got the patience. I don't know how. There's so many people that are doing it, so clearly maybe none to try. But
yeah,
Jeff, are you? I just sitting there all that.
There's
time,
actually a lot more people that fish than I thought would be here. So I love this. So y'all gonna like this. So I thought about this a couple weeks ago, and I'm not a massive fisher, but I have been fishing before, like 5 or 6 times. I'm not the best, but there's something about it that's cool when you finally do get a catch. I've caught 1 fish, so I'm okay, cool. I'll take that. It does require a lot of patience. There's a lot to it. My point that I'm coming up with this is when you think about cold calling, it's exactly like fishing. I thought about this a couple weeks ago, and it just came to me. I was like, it's literally exactly like fishing. So for those of you who fished, for those of you who haven't maybe fished before, but for those of you who fish, you know where I'm going with this. So you go out to wherever, the lake, the pond, whatever, right? And you get your bait, you're wearing your fishing gear, and you throw out your reel to go obviously bait whatever fish you're looking to catch. Now, it typically takes a good minute for a fish to come and get the bait. Just like when you're doing cold calls, it takes a good minute for someone to answer the phone, right? So it's literally I think the perfect analogy. So you're making cold calls and finally someone answers the phone and you value vomit all over them because you have no idea what you need to say because you've been making 40 calls and someone finally answered and you weren't ready for it. Just like when you're fishing, you could be sitting there for 40 minutes. A fish finally gets the bait and then you're not ready for it. And then you end up losing the fish and then you're frustrated. I've been there before. So I thought about that experience and it correlates to this question here on opening and hook. So when you think about a cold call in the first 5 to 10 seconds, you should be thinking about what is my 1, pattern interrupt, which is your opener, and 2, what is your hook so that you can get obviously the reel in for this person to schedule a meeting. So I see this as the fisherman's cold calling framework. And there's a whole thing to it, but let's just talk about the first 2 components. So the first part is the pattern interrupt. So I always think about what can I say to interrupt someone's pattern. An example of that might be hey, you don't know who I am. you, you don't know me, I don't know you, but here's the reason for my call. That's an example of like a pattern interrupt. So you have to do something that's going to be different. I have one person that I've coached, and their intro is like, hey, this is Morgan from Cognism. Congrats, this is a cold call. And he gets people to laugh. I'm not telling you to do all these different things, but you need to figure out what your pattern interrupt is. And then your hook. So your hook has different components. One is you find something on the website and say, hey, notice on the website you're hiring these people. Typically, when you're hiring these people, this is what this means, XYZ. That's number one. Number two is maybe you found something on their profile and you can point that out. That's a hook. Another hook is what we just talked about, identifying challenges, problems, obstacles, goals that people are looking to accomplish as well. So that's like the way that I think about the opener and the hook. I see it as a fisherman's framework. You need something that's going to interrupt their pattern, which is essentially like, something different, like a bait or whatever. And then you got to figure out how to hook them in once they're on that. So that's my example.
Love that. Love that. I think one thing that I learned very early is like, and it goes completely alongside what you just said, Morgan, but I try and give context as to why I'm cold calling. And I think that's sometimes something that people miss. I like to tell a story as to why I'm there. Now, the story it kind of becomes my hook, right? It's like I've seen them on LinkedIn or whatever. But I think that story and that context is really important as opposed to just piling straight through. When I did door-to-door sales back in the day, I used to talk about, oh yeah, the reason I'm here is because like I was selling vegetables. I was like, you might have seen our vegetable cart going past. Right now, there's no way they saw the vegetable cart going past because it goes around at 4 a.m. Nobody's awake at that time. But they, like everyone will be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And now this cold call instantly becomes warm. So if you could do anything, and you mentioned already, like I could see you're hiring, or I could see you just, I saw you on this article, and I saw this article about your company, and straight away I wanted to call. I think like making it warm is the best kind of hook if you can kind of tell that story and that narrative as to why you're there.
Exactly.
So totally agree. What do you how do you build that though, Morgan? Like how do you're starting from scratch like all over again? Like what are the key where are you looking to create your hooks?
Yeah, so Mike, are you saying, first of all, Mike said give me more examples of what? The hook, the intro, like which part are you talking about? And so essentially what you're doing is there's two components of it, right? So first and foremost, you have to figure out what your different pattern ups are. There was a fly, that's why I just the fly was in my face. But is when you're thinking about like a pattern interrupt, you have to decide what that's going to look like. So someone just put in here, hey Morgan, riddle me this. I have no idea if that's going to work or not. That's why I always encourage people to try it, right? And I could give you all different types of stuff, right, across the board on how to go about that appropriately, right? So you have to find what are the 5 to 10 pattern ups we want to try. That could be one. This one could be one. Another one is just saying like, hey, this is Morgan from Cognism, and you pause. That's a pattern up. People do that. It works really well. Another one is just starting off the call and saying like, hey, Sally, the reason for my call is, right? Another pattern interrupt is saying, hey, Sally, I'm from Cognism. Does that name ring a bell? That's another pattern interrupt, right? There's one that I like doing, which is like, hi, Sally, thanks for taking my call. Hey, look, I know I'm calling it the blue. However, do you have a few moments to chat? That's another pattern interrupt. So you see, I can keep going, but the whole point is that you need to identify 5 to 10 that fit your style. I've given you the framework. You need to have a pattern interrupt, period. You know that. Now it's like, what's the style of pattern interrupt? So Mike, I just gave you like 7. So then you go and do your calls and figure out which one works with my personas, which one works with me, and then you figure that out, and then you stay consistent. In terms of the hook is a little bit more personalized across the bell, right? You don't really know what's going to work or what's not going to work until you've done the research. So I'll give you avenues where you can go: product updates, promotions, leadership changes. I said the 10K report, the LinkedIn profile, what they're posting, hiring. These are 6 different hooks that you can go identify immediately. And then that's not including all the other things that you can grab from their challenge and priorities and their goals. So you can start there as a framework, and then now all you need to go execute. That's where people go wrong, as they think about too much around like what should we do. It's like, well, you have to go execute and figure it out.
That's awesome. Layla, I'm interested, Layla, do you have like do you have are you part of a big sales team, or is this something you're starting on your own? Because that's another thing, right? Like, is I find um being able to bounce off ideas off a team is super important, and like not being afraid to try what other people are doing. But I've had many times, I think you mentioned it there, Morgan, where like we've had, I remember this, we had this one Australian guy in the in our UK team, and he used to use the like, hey, this is a try an Australian accent. But when he said it in an Australian accent, I think every time people laughed, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
I might have told this story before. But as soon as the rest of the UK team started like doing it, it was completely lost. And I think it's because the tone and like everything else, like it wasn't authentic to them, but it was authentic to the Brad. If Brad is, if for whatever reason listening, Brad the Australian, then and so it resonated so much better. So definitely try what others are doing, but I don't get frustrated when like it doesn't necessarily work for you, because and you just keep trying new things, because as Morgan mentioned, like it sounding authentic is going to be incredibly important as well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. Yeah, so Layla, if if you've got a bunch of people around you, look at first port of call is to look at what the top people are doing. I'd say copy it, but as I mentioned before, you've got to work out what's authentic to you, and actually sometimes that might be taking what the best people are doing and tweaking it with like language, into a language that you also you feel really comfortable with. Awesome.
Cool.
What okay. What if we lie? I'm just seeing Garen is asking about what if we lie. What are your thoughts on lying, Morgan?
I don't like it at all, because at the end of the day, like it's just not. I think it's an ethical thing. Like typically, like that's not what I want to do. Like I hey, look, they didn't request a call back. They could call you on that. I've been called out before. It's just not an uncomfortable scenario. Plus, like, even if you do schedule the meeting, like, and you set a precedent that, like, they might feel like you are lying, and then now the account executive has to deal with it. It's just, I'd rather just not start off with a lie. I'd rather just be direct and transparent as possible. So it's not something that I recommend. Now, everyone can do what they want to go do, but I don't recommend lying to get a meeting here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I actually hate lying. It's a big no go in my book. So if any of my team cold call any of you guys and you hear them lying, let me know, because I'm not. It's about the journey, right? And you've got to be so focused on the customer journey. And if you've got people lying from the start, then like it's not gonna be conducive to like a good customer experience. Okay, Benazir, what have we got here? So keep throwing in your questions, and remember we do have that Q&A session section specifically. Feel free to throw them in there so other people can see them, vote them up, vote them down. We're getting some suggestions of what other people are doing in terms of their openers. Morgan, what do you think of Benazir's?
So my thing is, this is personal opinion. I've had multitude of different conversations about this, and I've gone back and forth on it for myself. Is that I don't like, in the beginning of the call, pigeonholing yourself to 30 seconds, because now you only have that much time. So I don't like starting off saying I have 30 seconds when I haven't even I haven't gotten an objection yet. I'd rather save that for later when I do have an objection and narrow time. But I don't want to narrow time when I haven't gotten an objection yet. That's my personal take. Everyone is different and everyone has different outlooks, but you're already narrowing time and they haven't said anything to you yet. Like they could have 5 minutes, but you just asked for 30 and now you only have 30. That's not helpful for you. So that's not a typically that's not the approach I like to take.
Do you know what I do love though? I agree. What I've seen before is people say that they've got 15 seconds and then asked and said like, okay, get out a timer and time me right now. And they've literally nailed their start to 15 seconds exactly. And I think that could be like really beautiful. So that's
so
the flip side.
I've done that before as an SDR, but I only do it when someone says that they don't have time. Okay. So when they say they don't have time, then I'll be like, yeah, 30 seconds, put a timer, etc. But I don't want to put the timer on myself. I don't want to shot clock myself when I don't have to. But some
That makes
people might
sense.
be like, yeah, I want to shot clock myself, and like this is how I get meetings quicker. And like, hey, again, it goes back to style. Do what you want to do. It's just on my context point. I'm like, well, like I don't want to put myself in that position from the beginning. Right?
Have you? I've also heard perhaps another idea around this is like you say, you know, will you give me 30 seconds to then give me another 30 seconds? Have you seen that before?
Yes,
Where they
and
kind of
that's
say like after this 30 seconds you can make a decision.
yeah, and that's part of the element of the permission-based opener, which I use an element of the permission-based opener. But my thing is, why ask for 30 seconds to get 30 seconds when you could just one of the things I say is like, why don't you just ask for a couple moments? So if they say yes, then you get exactly what you wanted. If they say no, then you just revert back to asking for 30 seconds anyways. So if I'm asking for 30 seconds, I might as well just ask for more. And then if they say no, then I can always revert back to the 30 seconds I was going to ask for anyways.
Totally makes sense. We didn't actually get to Mike's question, which I think was sorry.
Oh, we got
me and marketing are fighting for space. We actually I'm just reading this now, so maybe we've covered some of it. I work in digital mental health with an HR audience. I'm interested to hear what people try to achieve in their first call. When you finally get through, what's your first opener question? What do you qualify? Yeah, well, like what would you know, what from your experience, Morgan, what do you see people like aiming for? What's the like, and why also is it important to have like an aim on that first call?
Okay, first call when you finally get through. Okay, I was trying to like I'm thinking of it in terms of different lanes. So first and foremost, Mike, I don't know what you're looking to qualify for because that's an answer that you would have to unpack for yourself. Everyone has different rules of engagements. Everyone's looking to accomplish different things. I don't know what your handoff process is. I don't know if you're full sales cycle, an SDR, or you're just an AE. My answer would defer. So without me knowing those context points, you can provide them and I could probably give a better answer. But you have to figure out what do you want? What are the outcomes? And you should know that before you get into a cold call. You should be like, what am I looking to do? Well, essentially, for the majority of people here, you're looking to sell a meeting. You're not probably looking to sell a service or solution on a one cold call close. You're looking to sell the idea and the concept so that you can effectively sell the meeting and you can get a meeting. That's what you're looking to do. So once you've identified that, then you need to figure out what are the questions I need to ask to get people to open up that would lead them to wanting to take this meeting with me. So my first opener question is going to be completely different than what your question would be. So I can only really give you the framework on how to execute this. It's hard to give an exact question or an exact answer to this because every situation is so different and every persona is different too as well. So what I'm saying is what you're looking to achieve is to sell the meeting. How you're doing that and how you qualify, you got to figure out what outcomes you're looking to accomplish. And then on the third thing is you got to figure out what opener questions you're going to ask based on what the persona is. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. You got to understand the pain points. And then once you get that, you'll have a better question. So, for example, I might be trying to identify that someone is looking to increase their ramp time. So, or decrease their ramp time. So I'm going to ask questions around like, how are you currently making sure that your ramp time is decreased? What are you doing to make sure your reps are prepared after boot camp? Those are questions I'd be asking as an opener question. But again, everyone's questions are going to be different, but you got to know your pain points first.
Awesome. We have got a really great question here from George. I'm just going to share it now. Oh, marketing got there first. It's a race between me and the marketing team on the back end. So George is asking, how would you consider changing your approach today, especially with an increased sense of budget constraints in the market, which is only likely to increase rolling into 2023? Yeah, Morgan, I'm sure you're getting asked that question a lot, right now, in terms of like with everything going on in the economy, like how are you changing your approach, or are you changing at all?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The thing that I'm approaching, well, I would say the approach is definitely changing when it comes to discovery, for sure, right? Though how I'm asking certain questions, how I'm qualifying, etc. But that's not the question here. It's around the cold call itself. The value props are changing and the hooks are changing based on what customer success is telling us. So I'm going to customer success and figuring out like, why are people renewing? Why are people dropping off? Right? There's certain reasons why they're renewing and why certain reasons that they're not. So then I'm looking to identify what exactly does that mean? and how do I move with that moving forward, right? I have to go effectively, I got to go figure that out, right? So once I figure those out, and then I'm changing my hook to what are the buyers looking to get from us? What are the value props that we need to articulate? And that's how I'm able to get in front of that. Now, as you're selling the meeting, you obviously will have people saying budgets, etc. There's ways that you can handle those objections and still schedule the meeting. It gets a little bit different. It gets a little bit different, right, when you start having the discovery calls. That's my
I
take.
love that. Was that similar? You know, would you say that's similar to kind of when COVID happened?
Very
Was it a similar
similar.
story? Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, COVID, when things were like going obviously the way that they were going, one thing that I did is I took clients that I had from the training perspective. I did a client roundtable. I had 5 different people I reached out to, and I just asked them questions on like where their needs analysis was based on COVID, and uncovered what those needs were. And then I changed my messaging during that time for the next 6 to 12 months, and then obviously pivoted as things got remotely better. So that's just something that I did, and everyone can also take consideration of that as well.
Yeah, I think our big play at Cognism when COVID hit was really think about. We did exactly what you did, Morgan. We looked at our pipeline, looked at who was dropping off, but our biggest change that we had to make was in our targeting. Understanding like what companies were still doing well, were looking to hire still, were looking to still had money, I suppose, to spend. And so that might be the first thing that kind of I'd be considering going into this time is like, okay, maybe there's certain areas of the market that are being hurt more than others, and how can like actually just from a targeting standpoint, which is such an important part of being, of sales and sales development, especially, is going to be actually more important than perhaps like the call itself, which probably will remain the same. So really do think about your targeting, George, I think in this time. And yeah, I suppose the only other question is, because this is a classic, I think this happens all the time, is do you have any go-to objection handles, Morgan? And perhaps, to be honest, this is because it's such a it's something that comes up so often. I'm interested in what chat thinks, everybody in the chat thinks about about the objection handle, or the best objection handles for like, hey, I don't have any budget right now, like this isn't a good time because we've got budget constraints. Is it, Morgan, have you got any kind of key ones?
Yeah, so there's a couple of layer questions you could ask. So when people think of budget, they immediately say, "Oh, it's over." It's not over. You can ask some questions here. So my follow-up question that I typically ask people is, say, "Hey, when you say you have budget constraints, is that in your department or in the organization?" Hopefully you'll understand why that question is so important. So if they say it's in my department, well, that means that there aren't budget constraints in other places. So you need to go identify how to go get money in other places. So if they just say, "Hey, we have budget constraints in our department," all right, well, who doesn't have the budget constraints? We got to go figure out how to get budget from them, right? Let's say if it's the whole organization, then it's like, okay, what have you currently invested in the past 6 to 12 months, right? You want to figure out where they put the money at. And then you can identify how is that investment going, what is going on with that investment, and are they looking to even cut that investment off in the near future? So you can evaluate that. If they say they have budget constraints and they're not looking to invest in the next 6 months, then the follow-up question I can also ask is, okay, how are you planning? Let's say you've uncovered some stuff, right? Because you probably have uncovered some stuff for them to say we don't have budget for it. Then you're going to ask, how are you currently going to tackle this problem that we just identified without making any investments? So then you have to get them to answer to you what they're going to do internally to address the problem that you've uncovered. So I just gave you all a couple things that you could do to tackle that. So hopefully that was helpful for some people out there.
Awesome. We've got another question here from Humberto. I hope I'm not decimating. Humberto, where are you from? Where's that name from? I'd love to know. Humberto's asking about, okay, so if you call someone up and they say, "How do I know whether this is legit?" I'm thinking first and foremost, you've done a great job, because if it's too good to be true, then like, if the prospect's feeling like it's too good to be true, then like that's probably a good place to start. How you answering that? Oh, from the US. Whereabouts in the US, Humberto? Not.
This is an
Yeah,
interesting. What about when someone says, "How do I know this is legit?" I mean, it's gonna make y'all laugh. I'd be like, well, when people typically ask us this question, we hop on a 30-minute demo and show you a visual of the product to show you how legit it is. Like you just say, let's just see the product. Like if someone doesn't think something's legit, it's like, all right, then let's hop on a call. like that's like the way that I would go about it. I think it's a straightforward go for the ask at that point. David, I lose you. Am I still here? Oh well, okay. Looks like we're still going here. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that is that's the key service. I'm assuming that's a service. I mean, look, you would have to do a couple things. So I think one is like, well, you're gonna have to do some styling. Then you're effectively gonna say, hey, like, typically people ask me this question and like they wonder if it's legit. We've worked with people and you worked with them, etc. Have to story sell in that scenario. Like that's like the only way you're gonna do it unless you can visually show someone something. Sounds like that's not the case if I'm understanding correctly. Get that point across. It's the wait, Raj. People are asking you how do you. That's an interesting question. Why would they ask you that question? I mean, in these scenarios, like thing, right? Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Can y'all hear us now? I think we're going kind of going in and out here, y'all. So bear with us on what's going on. We're technical difficulties. It's all good. Hopefully you can hear me better now, but if not, y'all can let us know. So I see the questions coming through. I see in order lines. Rod. I mean, at the end of the day, like it's like, yeah, this is where this is where I work. Like this is what I do for them. Like I don't. It's an interesting question. Like I don't really actually have anything beyond what I'm telling you. It's just like, hey, I can see the information, call, and I can walk you. Like a lot of this stuff is like when people ask these questions, is just like, okay, like I can visually show you, or I can walk you through it, right? That's like the thing that I would actually focus on there, right? Umberto says you can't hear. Does anyone else say they can't hear me? Let me know. If I could probably change settings and figure out what's going on. But Humberto says he cannot hear me. Can everyone else also not hear me? Let me know, and I can change up my settings real quick. Okay, cool. Other people looks like they can't hear. So I just want to see like, all right, cool. Sounds like Humberto, maybe you need to make sure everybody's good. It cuts out. All right. It's weird. I don't know what's going on. But so let's go through like the next thing here. Rick, how do you react when someone says send me your information? I'll get back to you. Yeah, they're never gonna get back to you. So the question that you want to ask is what exactly or what exactly are you looking for in the email I'm gonna send you? Is you want to get the exact information and you don't want to just send generic and it also puts them to see if they really want it. Typically people will give you actually information when you ask this question. If people ask me for emails, I send over an email and it goes in an abyss and I never hear from them ever again. Annoying sales rep. Please let me know exactly what you're looking. Then you do something that I like to call the give get scenario. So essentially you're going to say, I'm going to send you over an email with the information that I just told you about. And and within that, we could schedule a call to then go over information. Does that sound fair? And in that scenario, most of the time people are actually willing to set up that call and they're willing to set you up in that format. So that's something I also would take in consideration as well. So Rick, hopefully that was helpful there. That's the way I would handle that objection. Again, most people are just not going to respond back to you. Dave, are you back?
I think I'm back. I'm
Okay.
sorry about that. That
I
is
I don't know what's going
very
on.
bad timing. I don't know
No,
whether
you're
it's
good.
me
You're good.
or whatever, but yeah, no, I think
You're
I
good.
think it was us. If anybody's selling internet here, then hit my company up, because that office Wi-Fi just collapsed. Cool. Where were we at? Have we got another question, or was there one? Was there a really good one that
There
I
was.
missed?
I just talked. We've talked about this one before, but it was like
Mm,
if we send an email, how do you handle the objection? So we just handled that, but now we have a new one.
cool, cool.
So my take on this one is not you don't want to call people out. So like you don't want to say like, "Hey, I know you're lying." Like don't do that. So what I know is that when people are heading into a meeting, you still have time. So if they're like, "Hey, I'm heading to a meeting," it's like it depends on what they say. Like if they're like, "I'm heading into a meeting," that doesn't stop you from saying what you're saying. Like it's like, "Cool, I'll make it quick," and then you just go into whatever you're going to say, right? Now, if they say, "I'm in a meeting and I cannot talk to you right now," that is different than them saying, "I'm going into a meeting." The semantics of how they say it is important. So if they say, "Hey, I'm heading into a meeting," okay, great. I'm going to keep this super quick. Like, here's the reason why I'm calling, and you go right into it. And if they stop you, or if they say, "Hey, I'm going into a meeting, but I cannot talk right now," then you're going to do what we just said earlier. So remember the 30 seconds. This is when you use it. Hey, I know that you're super busy. So all I'm asking for is 30 seconds of your time. And in that 30 seconds, I'll explain to you what we do here. And if it's applicable, we could put time on the calendar. And if not, you can hang up on me. Does that sound fair? Now, what you've done is you've actually constricted them to 30 seconds. Everyone has 30 seconds to talk on the phone if they picked up the phone. So you can get 30 seconds from your value prop off to then figure out if this is going to correlate into an actual meeting that you want. So that's something else you got to take in consideration as well.
Yeah, I wrote a post about this the other day, and I actually got quite a lot of heat for it. But I back what I said. In that post, I talked about how when you the problem is from an purely sales development standpoint, or for a salesperson SDR standpoint, when you're calling a prospect, so many of them are going to say they're going into a meeting as a brush off, right? That's the reality. Now, there will be a portion of people that will genuinely have like issues that, and they'll be in a rush, and maybe they picked up, like some people will say in the comments like, okay, I pick up the phone to everybody because like I'm worried that it's like going to be my kid's school or something like that, right? Totally understand. I think my instance just died again. Am I still
No,
here?
you're good. You're good. You're
Okay.
good.
What I see from my team is that more often than not, like, then they're kind of accepting, hey, like I'm rushing into a meeting at face value and just kind of saying, oh, when's a good time to call? And they never speak to them again. And generally speaking, 70 out of 100 times, the chances are people have picked to the phone because they do have a bit of time, and so try and take advantage of it. And I really do believe that like if you're good enough salespeople, which I'm sure everybody here is, you'll sense it in their tone when they are truly busy and truly they've picked up the phone because they thought it might be their kids or stuff, which would be totally understandable. So yeah, the main thing is just pushing, like I don't think it's necessarily calling BS, but like I think my first and I might keep saying it's unstable. I want to push through once so that way, that way I'll be able to tell again by their tone whether they truly are in a rush or not. So really good one. I'm just looking at. I hope we haven't been through any of these already. We're getting a question around how often should you change test hooks? Did we get to answer this one, Morgan?
We haven't answered that one yet. So my personal opinion is at the end of every quarter, like you want to see like what's working, what's not. If you're really not doing like if you're really not getting the results you want, maybe you actually need to look at that every month. But I look at it as every quarter. I look to assess and get an understanding of, okay, how do I want to change? How do I want to adjust, etc. That's how I go about it. I don't know what you're telling your team.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think people can test too much. I was talking today to a member of my team. He's doing a fantastic job and has been for many months. And then he's had just like a little bit of a slow week. And I think that in that, in a week-long period, you can just have bad luck. And I don't want to. I think it's really important to not reinvent the wheel. when you do have those slow weeks. But also, you should be iterating from time to time. So I would I would generally advise, like, if you hear something, if you get a new idea or something new, try it no matter what, but do it in a really controlled way. Like, plan it out. Ryan, one of our friends at Cognism, Ryan Rosert, talks about this all the time about how, like, don't be afraid to make it so that make 100 calls like normal, and then maybe do 50 of your calls with this new hook, and see, and statistically try and record which one's doing greater, and then based on that make decisions. So that's something that perhaps like you consider. But main thing, I'm kind of going off on a bit of a tangent, but the main thing is like, definitely don't panic and feel the need to change things completely because like maybe you've had like a poor week or whatever else, which is don't over test. Don't fix what isn't broken. I'm trying to think of trying to see if there's any more questions. All right. How do you ensure, this is a really good question from Freya. I don't know whether marketing can see this in the back. Freya Bardell, if you want to bring it up on screen. How do you ensure you're speaking to the right contact, one who holds the purse strings? Got any advice on that, Morgan?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's going to be probably like harder to get typically the decision makers on the cold call in general, right? However, this is where this comes down to prior research to the call. You won't know exactly, but you should have a good basis of like typically who are the decision makers. You should probably know, like, okay, the VP of IT, if I get them on the phone, they probably are the decision makers. Or you know what, like if I get the CIO on the phone, that probably is the decision maker. So you should know based on prior calls and previous data in your entire database on what is going to actually be a legitimate person that you're talking to. So that's just the way I go about it. I just look at prior experience and be like, this is the person I probably would be talking to. I don't ask people if they're the decision maker or things of that nature on a cold call. I'm just looking just to sell the meeting to then evaluate on a discovery call who that actually would be. So I actually don't ask a lot of questions around like, are they a decision maker on a cold call? I got to figure that out on a discovery call. So that's my take, at least.
Yeah, Freya, I don't know whether like you could just post in the because I think that sometimes, I mean, that size thing is going to really, really matter. The size of companies that you're going after is going to really matter in this sense. If you're targeting anything above 1,000, there's probably going to be a bunch of people. There's always going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to be involved in that decision anyway. And so I agree totally with Morgan. It's calling the ICP, calling your ICP up, and you're going to deal with all of that in kind of discovery. And if it's smaller businesses, I think like just try and go as high as possible. Try and go within your ICP, try and go for your VPs, your C-suite. They're naturally more likely to have the purse strings, but not strictly. But yeah, it's a difficult. Morgan, and this is a difficult one. Is there a way that you found is quite effective in terms of like asking a question that can give us info on whether people are holding the purse strings? Because like I don't want to cold call someone and then 2 minutes later say like, hey, do you have the money?
Yeah.
Like, are you the one that's have you got the credit card? So like, is there like, how do you get around that kind of situation?
It's a harder one because like you would have to be talking to them for like, you would have to be uncovering pain points and be asking really good questions to even uncover that in the first place. Like you would have to just be asking some really good questions. So look, like if they bring up competitors, like you could do a lane where it's like, hey, we implemented so-and-so, and you could be like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with them. Like, what was the range of investment you made with them? Like you could throw that out there, and then you kind of get an understanding of who the decision maker is, because they'll know how much they spent. So if they know how much to spend, or they give you a range, like, and they feel comfortable telling you, then like you have a decision maker. Some people may not feel comfortable telling you, and that might not be a decision maker, right? I mean, that's an example, but it's harder to get some type of, hey, I'm the right person who's going to make the decision when I haven't even done the discovery yet at all, because I can't ask that question from the get-go. It's harder on a cold call.
we sometimes towards the end of a cold call, if we get commitment, I think one thing that we've been trying to do is say like, hey, who would miss out? You might have seen this before, Morgan. You probably said this to us, and that's why
Yep.
we're doing it. But like,
Yeah.
like, who do you think would be missing out if like they weren't on the meeting?
Yep.
Which I think did you write a post about this literally this week? I've got that in my head now.
I wrote it. It was like 2 years ago, but I've been saying it for a while.
Okay. I don't want to steal your thunder, but yeah,
No,
like,
no,
so,
you're good.
so
You're
this
good.
is this is probably Morgan inspired, but you know, asking that question I think is super effective because you know it's not going to bruise the ego of the person that you speak to. It's just asking like whether there's someone like who could join the conversation.
Yep.
I want to pick up on, and I know we've kind of brushed on it already, but I think it's just like a really interestingly worded question. Chris Steinbacher, again, I hope that I don't massacre that name. I tend to have I keep getting feedback from these saying like massacred names. So hopefully I haven't massacred yours, Chris. But how do you reflect on the current economic crisis? Will sales get tougher, even tougher? Surely it depends on the different fields and sectors.
Well, will it get tougher? Yes. Period. It will. So it's just like with anything. If you look at the history, this is not to go too in much detail because this is like you're asking a sales question, but I got to give you like the actual answer. So if you look at the history of recessions, the people who had hyper focus and honed on skills, and someone said it earlier, they hyper focused on ICP and they were focused, were successful. The people who weren't continuously skilling up, weren't learning, didn't grow, like they had not a good time. So what you really should be focusing on is how can I make sure to skill up during this time? How do I prepare myself? It's going to get tougher, but the people who are skilled typically get through it. Ultimately, how I'm reflecting or other people are reflecting on it is how can I hyper focus on one thing? So this ICP, we do this for them so you can build just a continuous monument of case studies that you can sell as well, because you're going to be selling a lot of stories and you have to make sure you're like hyper focused and you're good at that. If you're doing like multiple things, you're all over the place, you're not focused, this is where people fall apart. And yeah, it will depend on different fields and sectors, and we don't need to go in all that. But to answer this question, when you see these things coming, you have to skill up, you have to prepare yourself, and you have to hyper focus on ICP, and you have to figure out what I like to call the buyer's buyer. So if you're going, like, for example, during COVID, there was obviously certain industries that affected. It probably didn't make a whole lot of sense if you were targeting companies that were going after restaurants and hotels. That would not have been a smart move for you. However, if you were going after companies that were selling cybersecurity, right? Event platforms like Zoom, that makes a lot of sense because like they're selling it to people who are continuously buying during that time. So you also have to look at what are different components, what are different products, what are different industries that will bolster during the certain crisis. And you got to find companies that are selling into those industries and figure out how can you help them as they sell to those industries. That requires research, that requires due diligence, but that's how I did it in COVID, and that's how I plan to do this when these things happen in the next couple months.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like I think we all know that what we've seen is that you know recessions don't last forever. So hopefully it will just be like a tough period of time, but it's just going to be a test of like it's a true test of character. I think buying processes are going to be more competitive than ever and harder because we're now competing against the time that we're in. And so yeah, we're just going to need to be the absolute. It's a cliche, right? But we need to be better than ever now to grind through it, as opposed to and then in the good times we need to make sure that we're taking advantage of it once again. So hopefully we'll all be all right. Keep tuning into this to get loads of really great advice on cold calling. That's gonna hopefully that'll put you in good stead. Perhaps now we finish off just with one from Stephen. Oh, sorry, Steve. But let me just bring it up. Okay, perfect. Yes. So, how does selling a consulting service differ from cold calling someone to get them to buy a product? Really, really interesting question. I'd love to hear your answer, Morgan.
I've done both. Steve, I would like to understand where exactly is this coming from? Are you going from a product to service or service to product? I'm trying to understand where you're coming from the question. So that would be helpful if you could put it in the chat. And then the main difference is that you're selling a tangible and intangible. It's like essentially what it is, right? The service is an intangible, so it's more of a vision sell. It's a little bit harder to sell a service. And then product, it's a visual, so you can sell it that way. When you're doing it on a cold call, like there's no difference. You're still selling the meeting. It's just how you sell the meeting is a lot different at the end of the day. So what I would say is that when you're going into the service, like you're trying to sell them on the concept of the idea of how you can help and how are you different than all the other services that are out there, and why wouldn't they just go to someone else? The product is essentially the same thing. Like, why would I look at your product when you have 8 other products in your category? But at the end of the day, all you're looking to do is sell the meeting, and you would just lean on stories a lot more from the consulting perspective, but you still need to do discovery. You still need to figure out what's going on. So you're still selling the meeting to get discovery. Nothing inherently changes except the fact that you have an intangible and a tangible.
I love Steve's confidence in the chat.
Hey, look. Then you should be good. You got no worries, and you're fine.
All right. I don't know whether we've got time for any more questions. I did just see one in the chat. It's compulsory for me to do a small plug. Marketing killed me if I don't. But Arla asked, do you prefer calling office numbers or mobile numbers? Sorry. Yeah, just a quick plug. I think hopefully everybody agrees here, but mobile numbers, because we're going to get straight through. I can tell you connect rates are twice as high, if not more, probably 5 times, 10 times higher on mobile numbers. And if you're looking for some Arla, then Cognism is. Jump on the website and request a demo, and we'll be sure to. One of my team will be sure to hit you up. All right, Morgan, thank you so much for another fantastic session. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I think we've got another one in another couple of weeks. So what we'll do is the marketing team will shoot in the chat a link so you can sign up and make sure that's all in the calendar and ready. We'll probably return maybe to our normal format, which is around getting people in and doing their mock cold calls with us. So feel free to reach out to us, either myself, Morgan, or Ashley Frank, who will probably put her details in, who's the kind of face behind this and kind of organizes all of this for us. So feel free to reach out to her if you wanted to be a part of that and run a live cold call and get advice and feedback from Morgan and myself. We'd love to have you on. But yeah, look, it's been a real pleasure. Follow Morgan if you don't already. He's got gazillion followers, so you probably already do. I'm also on LinkedIn, David Bentham, and we're producing some really cool content around all things sales development. So feel free to drop myself a follow as well. And yeah, Morgan, any final remarks?
Look, my final remarks are typically the same. Like, take this information that you all learned today and go execute. That's all I ask. Go execute, go do your thing. Hopefully this was helpful for everybody and this was somewhat impactful during the time you spend, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Amazing.